So this morning, I'm going to talk about the light bearer and discipleship. It's interesting to think about the times that we're in, not just in this country, but all over the world. There seems to be a lot of fear, a lack of hope, anger, a lot of anger. Many people feeling that their rights have been violated, that they're not being given opportunities to live a life that religion and philosophy and psychology promise them. And this is why I wanted to talk about what it means to be a light bearer, because to be a light bearer means we can do something to bring hope to the planet, to bring light to the planet, and what that means to bring light to the planet. And I think it's sorely needed, that the planet sorely needs light bearers today. So let me begin, and rather than sharing just opinions about that, let's think about what a light bearer is. Because it's not just someone who smiles all the time, or not one who is just socially pleasant and enjoyable to be around. The esoteric teachings, the teachings of the Ageless Wisdom, are very specific in defining what it means to be a light bearer. So if this is something that you want to do, someone that you want to be a light bearer, here are the qualifications. A light bearer is one who has made a commitment to bring light into the darkness. See, then our challenge is, how are we going to bring light into the darkness? Is it by being a political activist? In my opinion, the answer is no, and I know that that is just my opinion. But the reason I say that is because typically political activists are angry, and they stir up anger even though it's on the side of righteousness. To be a light bearer is one who, through their talents and their service and dedication to serve the greater good, is one who is a light bearer. Dedication to serve the greater good through their talents, through their service. So what you want to do is to ask yourself, what is my talent? And light bearers have multiple talents. It's not just one talent. So the light bearer must decide what talent in their treasure trove of talents has the greatest need in the world today, that you can bring this talent to meet that need. So where is the greatest need today? It may be to bring joy, and I truly believe that one of the greatest needs that we have that we find with humanity today is joy. Help them to find joy. Well, if you're a depressed person, if you're hopeless, if you are without trust of society and of your political system and of your religion and of your friends, then you're not going to be bringing them joy. So we need to determine for ourselves, through the teaching, what it means to be a light bearer. That's number one. Two is, what are my talents that I have to bring to meet the need of the general good, the greater good today, and then to create a plan how you can do this. Now, if you are a light bearer, you are going to be one that brings the teaching into humanity, because the teaching is the formulation of light. To bring the teaching to humanity takes education, it takes wisdom, it takes infinite knowledge, it takes a psychologist, not your normal day-to-day PhD psychologist, but a psychologist who knows the soul of humanity, a psychologist that knows the soul of another human being. When a light bearer understands psychology and knows psychology, then he'll know or she'll know how to bring that teaching, that formulation of light, into humanity to meet the need. See how that works? So a disciple is a light bearer. And I've actually changed the title for this morning's talk to bring in the phrase a light bearer, because even the term discipleship today, it has such a overbearing religious thought form that when a person hears the word disciple or discipleship, there's a reaction based on that person's experience, negative experience with a church or a pastor or a rabbi or a particular religion, and they've left. You know, the religions and so forth that use the term disciple. But when you read about, through the teachings, like about the life of Origen, who was a beautiful, beautiful, self-sacrificing man, then you know that that is a person who is a disciple, who is a bearer of light, who brings light into the world, who brings the teaching into the world. So it is the esotericist, when they hear the term disciple, it's not a religious statement or a religious term. It is a level of consciousness that that person has created from one life to another, to another, to another, through their service and their dedication to serve the greatest good of humanity. So we would say, we now call her Saint Mother Teresa, is a disciple. The fact that she was on a path of Catholicism has nothing to do with her discipleship. She served the greater good in humanity. She served non-Catholics. Very few priests even serve non-Catholics. Very few rabbis serve non-Jewish people. But you can have a rabbi who is a disciple. You can find a priest who is a disciple. You can find an atomic physicist who is a disciple, who may not ever even walk through the door of a church, but is a disciple, because a disciple is a light bearer. And they bring the teaching into humanity, the teaching being a formulation of light. A disciple, or the light bearer, brings fundamental changes into the world. How does that person do it? By their own transformation, by their own change of consciousness. It's like when you've had an experience, this huge, major situation in your life that has caused you to change your consciousness, what do you want to do? Your inclination is to go out into the world, whether your world is your family, your community, your nation, or on a world basis, and to share that change in consciousness. To bring transformation into the world is what a light bearer does. So a light bearer is going to be one that is so enthused about life as a result of the challenges and opportunities and difficulties that they've had, that has educated them and has changed their consciousness or transformed their consciousness. So that tells us that a light bearer is not one who has a life of ease and comfort. It's going to be a person that's just the opposite of that. And so we have humongous human beings. I know that's a weird word. I don't think it's a good one, actually. But a giant of a human being. Let's use that. We find giants within humanity that we can actually see as a light bearer. We have to have a giant for us to even see through our own clouds, our own cloudy nature, our own self-centeredness, our own narcissism, our own sense of self-importance. It takes a giant to move our own sense of self-importance out of the way and to say, oh my gosh, you know, there's somebody that might be greater than who I am. So we only have a handful of these giants on the planet, and they live a life of suffering, a suffering that we don't know much about except usually after they die, and then there's a biography and we read it, and then we somehow feel attached to them and to their life and so forth. But those giants have disciples. Those disciples almost magnetically, or we could even say magically, become sparks of that giant. And that spark inflames their heart, activates their consciousness in such a way that their light inside begins to grow. We're going to find thousands of light bearers in the world today. Our challenge is to see them, respect them, and to support them. It is the disciples of these giant light bearers that bring the teaching into every single country, every single field of human endeavor, which we know is called politics, education, psychology, the arts, science, and economics. So we don't have to say, I have to be a Christ, or I have to be a Saint Mother Teresa, or some of these other giants found in humanity, to be a light bearer. See, all we have to do is dedicate ourselves to the teaching and to bring the teaching into humanity. When we dedicate ourselves to the teaching, it means, well, I'm going to tell you what it means in a few minutes, so let me not elaborate on that. But it's very special. So our challenge is, first, if we want to be a light bearer, is transformation. We have to put ourselves in a life situation, which may be a year or it may be several lifetimes, to undergo transformation. When we undergo transformation, we become unified. Our physical, etheric, emotional, mental bodies become one. And in that oneness, we become transformed. And this takes preparation. So we prepare ourselves in such a way that we no longer hate. We may be hated, but we don't hate in return. We may have enemies that will do everything to undermine our striving and our work and what we stand for. But we look at that enemy as one who is shaping us into being eventually a great disciple, like Saint Mother Teresa, like the Christ, like Helena Rourke, like Torquem Serdarian, those that we are inspired by. So enemies do and give us a great service. Enemies of a country can do the same thing if the leadership of the country values enemies as a way or as a method to perfect that nation or to perfect themselves, as opposed to taking an enemy and wanting to hurt that enemy. See what I'm saying? Okay. Now, there's also transformation on the mental plane. It's not just a physical transformation, not just emotional transformation, but mental transformation. And I wanted to bring this up because typically light bearers have very developed minds, very developed intelligences. The downside of that is now they have to transform all of those ugly images, ugly thought forms that caused prejudice and negative opinions against others. So they have to take their highest vision and permeate any negative thought form, negative idea, negative opinion, negative prejudice, and transform it with the light of their vision. So that is mental transformation. Now, we are told there are 8 stages of a light bearer, also 8 stages in discipleship. And let me read these 8 stages. The first starts with the probationer on the path of light. Then is the aspirant, that's number 2. Number 3 is the accepting disciple or light bearer. 4th is pledged. 5th is accepted. 6th is a disciple on the thread. 7th is a disciple in the aura of the master, and 8 is a disciple in the heart of the master. Now, if you already know these 8 stages, and I think most of us here do, you're going to recognize that the first 3 start working together. You find yourself on the path of probation. You find yourself as a probationer becoming an aspirant. And as you become an aspirant, you realize that you are now accepting hierarchy. You're accepting Christ. You're accepting reincarnation and karma. You're accepting the master. You haven't yet been accepted, but as you travel this path of probation and the probationary path inspires you to a point that now you are an aspirant, you are aspiring for transformation. See, you are aspiring toward change. You are aspiring toward making this life as purposeful as you possibly can, because now you are accepting of hierarchy. You are accepting of a teacher. You are accepting of masters. See how that works? So those are the first three stages, which I believe work together. Then you have the pledged disciple. That comes very quickly. Right after you discover, no matter what happens in your life, no matter who's challenging you, no matter whose spouse says you're crazy, no matter whose son or daughter says, "Why do you think this way, Mommy?" Now you become pledged, because thinking this way is going to change the consciousness of your spouse, change the consciousness of your child in time, and change the world. Because the teaching is pure, and it is about the promotion of the continuity of life through joy and bliss and happiness, or happiness, joy, and bliss. Now, you're pledged. So you're a probationer, you're an aspirant, you're an accepting disciple, and you're pledged. Now, the next stage is a huge stage. It's a huge move to go into, and that is accepted. To be an accepted disciple means you have been tested through the smallest little test to the hugest test, and you've passed all of these tests. Now you go through a major initiation of consciousness, because the Master has accepted you. When the Master accepts you, now you have 100% trust by the Master. And you will not be a stumbling block in the work of the Master, which is a worldwide work. Worldwide work. Worldwide service. To become an accepted disciple means you are an instrument of the Master. You become an instrument of the ashram. An instrument to manifest the plan for humanity. So that's number 5. Then 6, 7, and 8 becomes more challenging to describe. But it's very descriptive. So after we've become accepted, we've gone through this initiation of consciousness, the next step is, like I said, is to be a disciple on the thread. You cannot move backward. When you become a disciple on the thread, there will be no turning back. To be a disciple on the thread means that you are in constant contact with the Christ, with hierarchy, and with the Lord of Shambhala. This means to be in constant contact means that the best way I can define it or describe it would be medical people, how they're on call. And when they're on call, it means the minute they get a phone call or a notification, they have to drop everything they're doing and they go to their job. So that's what it means to be a disciple on the thread. It means you're on call 24 hours a day. And nothing will stop you from responding to the call. You won't be deaf. You won't say, "I'm busy." And sometimes that call is, it's time to leave the planet. And so a disciple knows that, a disciple that's on the thread. It doesn't mean that it's easy for them. It's not. And the reason it's not easy is because they still have 300 years of work to do in that body. But the master or the ashram says, your body is too old. You know, we need a young body now because you have to reach younger people. So it's time to go. And then you'll come right back and go through that little body stage, growing up, but it won't be as difficult and challenging and as hard as it would be to be a unillumined baby. And then the seventh, a disciple in the aura of the master. It's very difficult to say the difference, to define the difference between number 6 and 7, and number 8, a disciple in the heart of the master. The best way I can define my understanding to be a disciple in the heart of the master is that your heart beats to the heart of the master. You breathe with the master, and I'm speaking metaphorically. So a disciple is, discipleship is a path to becoming our true self. To be a light bearer means that we are on a path of becoming our true self. We are in the process of moving from being the not self to the self, from the unreal to the real. And this is not easy. It's becoming increasingly difficult to be real in a society that is unreal. But to live anything less is to live a life of delusion, a life of pretending, or a life of imitating. Discipleship is about self-actualization. So while we are serving, while we are dedicating ourselves to serve the greatest good, we are also undergoing this process of self-actualization, of self-mastery, which is all about experience and application. It takes time, it takes lifetimes. Now the Buddha, in instructing his disciples, said, "We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make our world. Speak or act with an impure mind and trouble will follow you, as the wheel follows the ox that draws the cart." He said, we are what we think. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Speak or act with a pure mind. Speak or act with a pure mind, and happiness will follow you as your shadow, unshakable. Look how he abused me and beat me, how he threw me down and robbed me. Live with such thoughts and you will live in hate. Look how he abused me and beat me, how he threw me down and robbed me. Abandon such thoughts and live in love. In this world, hate never yet dispelled hate. Think about that, so powerful. Hate never dispels hate. Only love dispels hate. This is the law, ancient and inexhaustible. As the light bearer strives to live a life of service to the greater good, they must remain ever vigilant to their thoughts, to speak and act with a pure mind, and to transform what is negative and ugly into thoughts of love and beauty in their service to others. So let's say that you're an educator. Let's say that you're a political science college professor. Your job, if you are a light bearer, is to educate your students with love and beauty, not with retaliation, not through, quote unquote, history repeats itself, not through breeding hatred of the enemy, but to educate them about love and beauty in the future, bringing it to the now. It's just an example. The light bearer tries to live with pure motive, without personal attachment and self-interest. Periods of search, periods of pain, periods of detachment, periods of revelation. Such is the story of the path of illumination, the path of the light bearer. It is a path of revelation and new vision. Revelation and new vision. Imagine living a life where new visions are given to you. Revelations come to you. Imagine living a life like that, and then taking the new vision, taking the new revelation, and serving through your talent that new vision, that revelation. One which ever draws you onward into greater light. I want to give you a definition. I know we're really running out of time, but let me give you this much, because sometimes people don't understand what the capital S self is. It's an abstract idea. So this takes the abstract and puts it into a practical form. It is to recognize that the capital S self is your center of creativity. That center of creativity which is within you is the self. It is the center of light and love and power. That is the self. So the more we actualize that center, is the more we are actualizing the capital S self, which is the more we are actualizing our divinity, our life purpose. So that's the capital S self. Such a person brings their creativity to the world through vision, through a vision. This vision will reveal the purpose of life. Their creativity inspires others with new direction. Their spiritual fire ignites aspiration. See, that stage of consciousness which puts them on the path from probation to aspiration. See how that works? It's not so well defined in black and white. It all merges together, blends together, fuses together. So you take the light of a light bearer who is functioning through the capital S self according to their the manifestation, or what is manifested to date from that center, and it activates the heart in others. And in activating the nature of the heart in others, they become creative through their center. The light bearer is one who is becoming self-realized. They have heard the inner call of the self, And in responding to that call, they begin to strive beyond the ordinary life. They learn how not to lose themselves in different situations, different emotions, reactions, and difficulties. They learn how not to lose themselves, even through their successes, as well as failures. They eventually learn over time all of these situations, from the most difficult to the most positive, is the process of enlightenment, during which time that light bearer is in the process of finding their true self. A disciple's power is in their unselfish service for humanity. I just have so much to share. I cannot, I feel very bad that I can't get to all of it. Let me see if I can just stay with my notes in 3 minutes. Here's a story. There was a man who was leading an ascetic life and not eating bread. He went to visit an old man. They never visit old women. I don't know. I guess it doesn't conjure up a beautiful picture to have an old woman versus an old man with a beard and skinny and in a cave. I can't even myself visualize an old woman like that. So he went to visit this ascetic, went to visit an old man. It happened that pilgrims also dropped by, and the old man fixed a modest meal for them. When they sat together to eat, the brother who was fasting picked up a single soaked pea and chewed it. When they arose from the table, the old man took the brother aside and said, "Brother, when you go to visit somewhere, do not display your way of life." And this is very important for you to think about. So you get rid of the holy-poly consciousness, okay? But the old man went on and said, "But if you want to keep to it, then stay in your cell and never come out." He accepted what the old man said, and after that behaved like the others whenever he met with them. Well, I can't think of a better example than some of the stories our dear teacher Torquem Saradarian told us. When he was living in Sedona, and he'd go to the gas station and get under the car with the car person, and they would empty the oil pan and all these things they do underneath the car. And that gas station attendant never knew who he was. And we were aghast. Being more normal than normal. He didn't say, "Look, do you know who I am? Do you know I know what my past lives? Do you know I travel to the other worlds consciously?" He never said anything like that. And if that person was smoking, he didn't necessarily say, "Why are you doing that?" He would wait until he would get that person in the right place. See, in the right state of consciousness, and say, "Let me tell you a little bit about what your future is going to be like if you continue to smoke, if you continue to do drugs, if you continue to yell at your husband or wife. This is what your future is going to be like." And then he gave them the freedom of choice. Now here's one more story, and then I'll close. Nasruddin was now an old man looking back on his life. He sat with his friends in the tea shop, telling his story. Here's his story. "When I was young, I was fiery, and I wanted to awaken everyone. I prayed to Allah to give me strength to change the world. In midlife, I awoke one day and realized that my life was half over, and I had changed no one. So I prayed to Allah to give me the strength to change those close around me who so much needed it. Alas, now I am old, and my prayer is simple. Allah, I ask, please give me the strength to at least change myself. And I found this on the internet, and I wanted to share it because many of us have studied the teachings of Gurdjieff. And Gurdjieff called Nasruddin the one and only, the wisest of the Sufi teachers throughout history. Gurdjieff gave high significance to this teacher. Gurdjieff said of Nasruddin that he was a man who was intelligent, not in the European sense of the word, but in the sense of which it is understood in the continent of Asia. That is, not only by ordinary knowledge, but by being knowledge. I thought that was very interesting, being knowledge. To me, that means we're not going to quote the teaching to others. We're going to exemplify the teaching. And in that exemplification, we are reflecting our light. So that's it. There's a lot more to share, but we don't have time. We're out of time. So let us think now about these terms, disciple and the light bearer, so that we can clearly define and understand. To be a disciple is to eventually be a great person, like the masters, like Saint Mother Teresa, like Christ, like the Buddha, and so forth.